Hi, Logic students. I wanted to make a video on section 7.1 because some of you may find it a little bit more challenging. In 7.1, really, what we need to do is learn how to do proofs. So proofs are the really important aspect of this section, and you find these in part 3. In part 3 of exercise 7.1. All you have to remember in order to do these proofs correctly is the rules of inference that we have learned. So these are familiar patterns of reasoning. So first, modus ponens, if P then Q, P therefore Q. When you reason in this way, you always reason validly. Think about it, you use this pattern of reasoning all the time. If you know that if it rains, you need to bring your umbrella, and then you realize that it rains, then you conclude that you need to bring your umbrella. Similarly, another pattern of reasoning is P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. You use this pattern that is known as modus tollens. When you reason that if the milk has gone bad, then it smells, but then you smell it and you realize it doesn't smell. So you conclude that it hasn't gone bad. And then there's the pattern where you have two alternatives and one turns out not to be available, so it must be the other. If you know that P or Q, not P, you conclude that Q is the case, disjunctive syllogism. If you know that your class meets either in room 301 or in room 310, and you go to 301 and you realize your class doesn't meet in room 301, then you conclude that the class meets in room 310. So you have two alternatives. One doesn't go, it must be the other. And finally, we also reason very often that if two conditionals are related in a certain way, then something follows. Suppose you know that if P then Q, and if Q then R, it follows that if P then R. Hypothetical syllogism. If you know that if you neglect to maintain your car, then the engine may overheat, and if the engine overheats, then you may have to make costly repairs. That entails that if you neglect to maintain your car, then you may have to make costly repairs. This is really all familiar from ordinary reasoning about everyday matters. So now that we have kind of reviewed the patterns of reasoning, I still have them here on the right-hand side: modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, and hypothetical syllogism. Then we can learn how to do the exercises in section 3 or part 3 in section 7.1. What I have here is as an example number 13 from part 3 in section 7.1. And this is an argument with 4 premises, which are written down here. You're going to write them down first. These are given in the exercise. And the conclusion is not A. Basically, this is a valid argument where the premises entail not A, but you have to prove that the premises entail not A. And when an argument is valid, you can go from the premises to the conclusion by applying by a series of steps, where each step is an application of one of the rules. So basically, all you have to do is take each step, and for each step you need to invoke one of the rules. And in order to know what rule to apply, you just scan the lines that you have here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and see if any two of these lines taken together click together in the way that the premises click together in one of these rules of inference. Okay, for example, look at You can see that in modus ponens, for example, you have a conditional, and then the second premise is formula that is the same as the antecedent of the conditional. So these two match exactly. And when that happens, you can bring down by itself the consequent of the conditional. So look over here and see if you can see the same pattern exemplified in any two of these lines. And a moment's reflection shows that you compare this line and this line, that's a modus ponens waiting to happen because you have a conditional. The antecedent is R, and then you have the antecedent by itself on a line. So you can infer the consequent. On line 5, you will write that formula in the consequent, G or A. And you have to justify the step. So you used lines 1 and 4, the rule of modus ponens. Okay? And then you do the same thing over and over again until you reach what you want. Eventually, you have to produce not A. You may be able to see already what you need to do, or you may simply keep going, and eventually not A will pop out by itself, almost by itself. For example, look at lines 2 and 5. Again, there is a conditional. If G or not A, then not S. The main connector is this one. And then you have the antecedent of that conditional by itself. Again, lines 2 and 5 click together in accordance with modus ponens. So you can put them together and you can derive not S. On line 6, you write not S. And this will be justified by these two lines, 2 and 5, and modus ponens again. See if there's another match. Well, I see here that 3 and 6 go together in accordance with modus tollens. Modus tollens, you have a conditional. Then you have the negation of the consequent of that conditional. And you can infer the negation of the antecedent. So look at lines 3 and 5. You have a conditional with G and S. And then you have the negation of the consequent, not S. So you can infer not G by modus tollens. Look at line 7 then. In line 7, you enter not G by 3 and 6 modus tollens. Sorry. 6. Tollens. And now we're getting close to what we want. Remember, we're shooting for not A. We need to produce not A, which is the conclusion on a line by itself. And again, if you scan the lines and you try to put them together in pairs, you will see that line 5 and line 7 click together in accordance with this pattern, disjunctive syllogism. You have an either or, and then the negation of the first part of the either part. So you infer that the or part must be the case. Look here, you have G or not A on line 5, and then you have not G on line 7. So what you can conclude is that not A is the case. Okay, let me get rid of these marks because they may confuse you. They're not negations. I can get an eraser right here. Okay, so erase these marks. I don't want to confuse you. What you have is G or not A, and then you have not G. So by disjunctive syllogism, you're left with not A. Back to my pen. line 8, infer not A by 5 and 7, disjunctive syllogism. Yes. And you're done, because you were trying to produce not A, that was the conclusion, and you reached not A. I hope this helps you see how to tackle these exercises. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.